going to start with Vic-Maui and then dive into safety stuff. And Stuart told me earlier today it's a dog and pony show, but he didn't say who's who. Who's who. So I'm going to start with Vic-Maui. And the Vic-Maui race, how many people here have done a Vic-Maui? Oh, lots of people. Okay. How many people are going to do a Vic-Maui? Put up more hands. Come on. Okay. Excellent. Good. So I'll just give you some info. Vic-Maui was founded in 1965. It's been run, it's been run 24 times so far. So it dates back to about the same time that Straits race was founded. But Vic-Maui is run every second year in even numbered years. And it's co-hosted by Royal Van and by the Lahaina Yacht Club. And the Lahaina Yacht Club was actually founded in between the 1965 race and the 1968 race. And Vic-Maui's been their signature event ever since the club was founded. The race starts in Victoria, usually in July. And it's 2,308 miles on the rum line. Nobody's ever done that before, although some people have tried. They're still out there. And it finishes just off of Kanapali or Lahaina in Maui. So it's actually the longest of all of the Pacific Ocean races. A little bit longer than Transpac or Pac Cup because it's starting farther up the coast. So pretty interesting race. We've had boats, everything from real small boats all the way up to boats like Paiwacket have done Vic-Maui. At one time Paiwacket held the race record. But most of the boats, to give you an idea of a typical Vic-Maui fleet, most of the boats are in the 32, 35 foot range all the way up to 50, 52 feet. Typically the boats are performance-oriented cruising boats or cruising-oriented performance boats or somewhere on that spectrum. And it's definitely a race because there's at least a couple boats that can see each other at the start line, and you know that's a race in sailboat terms, but it's really also an excuse for one of life's big adventures. Most of the boats aren't the kind of boats that could set a course record. So they're really focused on trying to win, get an overall win on handicap. And some boats use Vic-Maui as a launching pad to go on. So we all think about you do Vic-Maui and then you bring your boat back. But for example, in the last Vic-Maui race, there was a couple that, they were it was a man and a woman when they started it. They came to Vancouver from Alaska with their boat. They got married in Vancouver. Then they went to Victoria and did Vic-Maui, and they're still out there. They used it, went off to the South Pacific and over to Indonesia, and I think they're up somewhere in the Japan area right now. They're doing a Pacific Ocean circumnavigation. They're going to finish across the North Pacific and the Aleutians back to their home in Alaska. And there's been lots of other variations on that as well. So not everybody comes back from a Vic-Maui for a good reason. Some of the boats, I mentioned Paiwacket, there's been lots of Merlin, Grand Illusion, lots of boats like Santa Cruz 50s, 52s, 70s, various kinds of sleds, local fast boats like Strum. So there's been some downwind ultralight flyers, and those boats they're not only going for the overall win on corrected time, but they're also going for line honors and the prospect of an elapsed time record. Right now, that 2,300 mile rum line, the course record's only 9 days and 2 hours, and it was set in 2000, so it's 14 years old. And for anyone who's so inclined, it's ripe for the picking. In 2012, our fleet, we had 10 boats in the racing division. The top left one with the nice blue spinnaker, that's double take, it's a J145, they ended up winning the race overall. And a bunch of local boats as well as US boats. And we also had 4 boats in the new cruising division, including West Vancouver Yacht Club's own Ballymac. Is anyone here from the Ballymac crew? Those guys ate filet mignon and wrote emails about it every day all the way to Hawaii.
And they were winning halfway through the race.
Vic-Maui fleet sizes, actually, if you could do this kind of graph for all the major ocean races, it's quite interesting. They tend to go through fluctuations. And Vic-Maui, in the modern era, peaked at about 20 boats in the early or late 1990s, I guess, and went down during the financial crisis down to only 9 boats in each of a couple of years. For the 2012 race, the fleet bounced back up to 14 boats. And for the 2014 race, we've already got 14 entries that are in and paid, and we're not at the race entry deadline yet. So it looks like it's continuing to rebound. So it's a bit of a navigator's race. You know, some of the races you basically reach out off the coast or claw your way off the coast till you can get into the trades, get across the ridge and into the trades. Vic-Maui, you gotta get out the Strait of Juan de Fuca. That's kind of like a Swiftsure, except that you turn left at Flattery and you don't come back. In fact, the course instructions basically say leave Cape Flattery and one of the buoys there to port, and leave the island of Maui to port. And those are the intermediate rounding marks, if you will, on your way from the start to the finish. So you got to get out of the Juan de Fuca, then you got to get south to the trades, and that's usually a real bit of a head scratcher because the rum line heads out off the coast, but it also can take you right through the North Pacific High, which sets up in the summer and has very light air in the middle. So you know, there's some compromise you got to figure out between going down the coast for what's usually more pressure but a lot of extra miles sailed versus cheating your way over towards the rum line and risking getting parked up in the high. Once you get into the trades, it's all about slotting yourself in so that you can get in the trades and jibe for Hawaii without having to do a bunch of extra jibes or miles. And so, I'll show you a little picture of what that looks like. So, the very top of the chart here, you can see the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and the red line is the rum line. Anyone know why it's called a rum line? Well, because if you follow it, you're going to need a lot of rum. Okay, so these are on this chart is actually the actual tracks of all the boats from the 2012 Vic-Maui. So you can see some guys went out close to the rum line initially and then figured out that wasn't going to work and had to jibe or work their way back in towards the coast. Of course, you're out of sight of land very quickly. And the big curve here with the whole fleet curving around, that's everybody kind of working their way around the edge of the high. You know, you don't want to go in there, but you don't want to sail extra miles. So you see a lot of different tactics here. And at the bottom of the chart, you start to see guys having to jibe because they got too close into the high and started getting really light air. So now they got to make a really terrible angle jibe to get themselves back out into breeze or pressure. As you're going out or down and around the high, typically it's initially you're close reaching. Eventually you get 2 or 3 sails up front and you're broad reaching. But you're working your way around for probably at least 1,000 miles of reaching at various angles. Now we're getting close to you're crossing the ridge that comes off the high, and you got to pick your jibe angle to Hawaii. And so you can start to see where some boats, again, the boats that are on your left-hand side of the screen, especially the guys that are on the inside of the rum line, that's a really tough spot to be because if it works, you sail all the way to Hawaii and you win the race because you sailed less miles. But if it doesn't work, and you can see what's happening here, you know, if it doesn't work, you got to do jibe, 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 jibe to kind of keep running out of air and then jibing away. And that's really tough if the other boats figure out how to get around the corner without having to do that. Finally, wherever and however you've picked the final jibe angle into Hawaii, at that point you probably are back somewhere on the rum line because you've come around the high and then you're jibing for Hawaii, and then it's a real race into Maui. Pretty fantastic sailing in those conditions, ripping along, and you know there's some clouds but there's a lot of sunshine. It's usually smoking hot and you're begging for shade. So that's the overall picture of what the 2012 fleet did. And then, of course, you sail through the finish line. If you're lucky, which happens a lot in the channels in Hawaii, it's blowing 25 to 30 knots or more. And so you've got to be on your game for the finish, because there's usually people taking pictures there. And you're pretty close to shore. Now, when you get there, everybody gets laid. And they even lay the boat. So there's a traditional Hawaiian greeting with real flower lays, and they'll put a flower lay around the bow of the boat as well. Big party when each boat arrives, and it doesn't matter whether you arrive at 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They have a foam fan-out system to all the family and friends that are there waiting for you. And you do a radio check-in from 25 miles out, and then they scramble everybody, and there's an instant party for your boat. In addition to that, there's also an overall awards banquet for everybody. So these are the key dates here for the 2014 Vic-Maui. And I will mention that Vic-Maui is going to celebrate 50 years of Vic-Maui with the next race, the 2016 race. So for the people that didn't put their hands up for 2014, this is the right time to start planning. And you know, you should probably have an extra beer while you're thinking about the decision. A couple just kind of wrap-up notes. Vic-Maui has 4 official Vic-Maui qualifying races. Southern Straits race is the first one on the calendar, followed by the Oregon Offshore race, Swiftsure, and in alternating years the Van Al 360. And while they're called Vic-Maui qualifying races, they're not mandatory for the boat, but they're strongly recommended that the crew in the boat at least do some of those races as part of their preparation for doing something like a Vic-Maui. The other thing I want to mention here, I'm not sure if Paul Mendham from Navis is still here. Yes, he is. So Navis is one of Vic-Maui's sponsors, and I'm reminded that for boats that are planning to do Vic-Maui, but also boats that are planning to do a race like the Oregon Offshore race, those races take you outside of your normal insurance policy, what are called trading limits, or your geographic region. So if you're doing those kind of races, you've got to call your insurance broker before you need to make a claim, and pay them to expand your trading limit for those races. Any quick questions on Vic-Maui before we kind of switch gears and talk about how to get boats ready for offshore and so on? Okay. We're going to let our cameraman change